Welcome to Shoe Pack Sports. I'm Marty Shoepack, and we're all in for a good time. Today we have Jon Orr, who is started a website called the Sports Reclamation Project, which is really I find fascinating, which touches upon basically almost all the youth sport issues today. Jon, how you doing?
I'm great, and thank you for having me.
Okay, Jon, let's get right into it. Now, you coached for a while. We're going to get into your background in a few minutes, but I want to ask you issues with parents. When a coach sees a problem arising, and let's say with one parent in particular, what's your take as far as do you think they should be proactive and like contact the parent and say, "Hey, Mr. Jones, something seems to be bothering you. What is it?" Or do you think they should wait for the parent to actually come to them to complain?
I definitely say proactive, and proactive, I believe, begins before the first game. But if you were to poll coaches, especially in the youth ranks, I think one of the biggest pet peeves, especially volunteer coaches, is what we call bleacher coaching, where you have a kid, for example, basketball. With the basketball setup, coaches on one side, the four parents on the other. You've got mom or dad in one ear yelling one thing and coaches in the other. And that puts a child, I always say anybody who's a parent of more than one kid, think of how overwhelming it is when both your kids are talking to you at the same time. It's a lot. Imagine being 10 years old and you have mom and dad who you know you're supposed to respect and listen to on one side and coach on the other. It's a tough decision. I believe at the beginning of the year, the coach should be very upfront and say, listen, I understand, I appreciate you want little Johnny to get better, but you need to give me the space to work. I think now you're still going to have that, but if you lay that out up front, you can address it. I think it's on the coach to be upfront. Display your standards for playing time. That's one of the biggest arguments. Share your philosophy. If playing time is earned, you need to be clear on what you expect to have it earned. But at the same time, as a coach, and I will die on this hill, if a player is good enough to make your team and participate in practices, it is your job to find meaningful minutes for that player. And by meaningful, I don't mean the last 2 minutes in garbage time. We call it garbage time for a reason. Those people know why they're going in. You can find meaningful minutes during a game, but the coach has to be upfront and honest. I think a lot of the disputes come due to lack of communication.
Right. And just so you know, Jon, I'm a big New York Jets fan, so I know a lot about garbage time. But I just want to ask you, are you a proponent of, I know you spent a lot of time coaching, but are you a proponent of having a parents' meeting at the beginning of the season?
Oh, absolutely. My background is in education. So the first practice, I almost do like an orientation. Um, I I have a Outlook file drive I send out explaining myself, my background, my coaching philosophies, my goals, my parental expectations. And I open the floor for questions. I open the floor for, some parents want to pull you aside because their child might have an issue or ailment and they want to talk about it privately. But it makes you more receptive. So absolutely, I'm a fan of, and I also go as far as I like to share my little handout early so you're not blindsided with it. They can review it, they can look at it. So absolutely.
Right. And I interviewed another coach, and we spoke at length about a parents meeting, and we both agreed it's not going to cut all the complaints, but it'll cut it down anywhere from like 40 to 60%. You're still going to get complaints, but he had a nice take at his parents meeting, and he was coaching baseball, I guess, I don't know, recreational 25 games. And he said, look, I'm not going to take any complaints till after the first five games. If you want to call me up after that, you can. And what he found out, not only did the complaints go down, but after five games, sometimes the issues took care of themselves, which I thought was pretty interesting. And I want to also ask you, we all have our own coaching philosophy, and I'm sure you played ball and you had some coaches that you loved and you looked up to, whatever. But How important is it to develop in youth sports your own coaching philosophy?
It's very important, but I always preface that with the expression, good coaches borrow, great coaches steal. My longtime mentor was my high school basketball coach, the late Lonnie Workman. I took a lot of his philosophies. The one about if you're good enough to make my team, I need to find a way to use you. That was his philosophy. But you also have to build your own, and you've got to be comfortable as a coach with your philosophies changing. I mean, we were of a different age demographic, but I came up in the era that the coach was always right, even if he was wrong. As a coach, you have to admit, you know what? Maybe for this team, my philosophy needs adjusting. A philosophy cannot always be concrete. There should be some non-negotiables, but you have to admit with certain players, okay, this philosophy is not working. So it's good to have your own philosophy, but you can't be so rigid in it that my way or the highway on this philosophy. You have to have some non-negotiables. One of my non-negotiables is if you are disrespectful to an official enough to where he has to address it, you're going to sit for a few minutes and cool down. I'm real big on respecting officials. Or if mom or dad says you're not playing because grades or school performance, I'm going to respect mom, and that's a non-negotiable. But there's others that are some a little bit more fluid.
Yeah, okay. And I was on your website, the Sports Reclamation Project, and came across one of your articles, and they talk about, or you spoke about the ego state therapy. I'm wondering if you could give just a general idea of what it is in the layman's term. Don't you don't have to go into too much detail, and then we're going to get into your background a little bit.
Okay, well, absolutely. Now, first of all, I'm not a therapist. I originally discovered ego state therapy in all weird places. I got a speeding ticket when I was 17 years old, 23 years ago, and had to take a driving. Actually, I was told by my mother I was taking a driver improvement course for the insurance. And they talk about it there, the adult, the child, and the parent. A child wants to get revenge. A parent wants to punish, and this is very layman's terms, an adult takes a delivered measurement. And I believe to be an effective coach, you got to operate in the adult mindset. For example, I've seen coaches run up the score on a group of 9-year-olds in basketball because they don't like the coach they're coaching against. So they punish a bunch of 9-year-olds. Now, if you ask any parent that, they would say it's childish. Or a coach sitting a player on the end of the bench because he doesn't like mom or dad. That's a childish action. The coach is operating in a childish mindset. The parent is the coach that you didn't do this, I'm going to run you till you throw up. Or you're going to do push-ups till you throw up. Or you're going to sit here and just rot on the end of the bench. Even though numerous experts have said exercise as punishment is the worst approach for coaches. That is a parent wanting to punish. There's a discipline, but there's a difference between discipline and punishment. And we could go for hours on that. The adult is the one, the adult mindset takes a more measured approach. They need to see it from, they need to remove themselves. Like I was related to being at work. Something happens at work, you're upset. You want to act like a child, you want to act like a parent, but you know at the end of the day, that's not going to end well. You have to act like an adult. You have to make the mature, rational decision then and there to address the issue. And that's what I mean by coaches need to function in the adult mindset in order to be effective. It's not about getting revenge. It's not about proving a point.
Right. Okay. All right, John, let's go into your background a little bit. Give you the listeners an idea of your background. You gave us briefly, you mentioned it, and tell us a bit about the Sports Reclamation Project and why you started that.
Okay, a little bit of background on me. I am a basketball player by trade, a veteran. I played rugby in the Navy, which was a lot of fun. I boxed. I was one of those kids that was constantly going. I started refereeing basketball at 15, and I got into coaching. At the same time, again, my mentor, Lonnie Workman, had a basketball league, and his caveat was to play on this high school basketball team, you owed him community service. So I've literally been refereeing and coaching since I was 15 years old.
And
Um,
what town was this in? Were you?
Lakeland, Florida.
Okay.
And I ended up getting into college. I'm 6'3". I played in the post in high school. Quickly realized I was undersized, and I always say I forgot the most important thing about being a student athlete, and that was being a student. So I blew that, ended up joining the military, and then later going back to school and finishing my degrees. But I was always around sports. And I started maybe 10, 15 years ago. We're doing things wrong. I saw too many kids crying on the sidelines at 6 and 7 years old. I saw too many parents taking it way too seriously. I remember being 16 years old, volunteer reffing church league basketball, and having the parent come out on the court during a timeout, screaming at me, poking me in the chest about the job I was doing. And I've always realized we're doing it wrong. I've always thought we're kind of doing it wrong. And when the numbers came out that 70% of kids will quit sports before they're 13 years old, and the main reason being it's not fun, that's a problem. To put that into perspective, an average basketball team has 10 kids. If you take a 9-year-old team with 10 kids, in 4 years, three will still be playing. So the purpose of the Sports Reclamation Project was kind of return some sanity to it, bring fun back into the game. The motto is let's give the sport back to the kids. Um, I always tell parents, Danny Hurley, John Calipari, they're not at your kids' game. And more importantly, they only get to be kids once. Let them be kids, let them have fun, let them enjoy the game. And that's my whole thing. It goes back to this belief of transformational coaching.
Right. And your organization now, is there a membership or subscription, or are there courses, or is it in the developmental stage?
It's in the developmental bare bones stages. I am affiliated with the Positive Coaching Alliance. I'm becoming a trainer there, and I'm working on building courses. But right now, it's kind of grassroots. It's unfortunately, in some ways, we see some pushback. People don't think it's got a lot of pushback, and that just goes back to people not liking being told maybe what they're doing is wrong. And I understand that we are in the developmental stages. I'm part of the Virginia Youth Sports Mental Health Alliance. I'm currently living in Virginia, and we are just getting the word out. I do want to get training. There are some templates on there for how to run effective practices, templates on how to be a transformational coach, just things like a checklist of things you can ask a player. Like one of the things I like to do is I don't care if they walk in late. Hey man, how you doing? Glad you're here. Greeting players, greeting them by name, checking on them, making sure they're good. Right now, we're just in the beginning stages, and it's a very slow process. But my eventual goal is I want it to be all free learning courses for coaches who want to do things a little bit different, and for parents who want to do a little bit different. Parents, I have a philosophy, youth sports parents, most of them aren't bad. There's some ones out there, and we've heard about them. My theory is most of them, it's the first time they've not been in control of their kids' choices, and it's hard to handle.
Okay. And I'll ask you this at the end, though, but you do have a newsletter. Is that right?
It's a subscription newsletter. It's the blog goes to your email. I
Okay.
do the blog. I prefer the blog and things of that nature because it's easier to log. If you
Right.
subscribe on my page, it does go to you via email, but
Okay.
as an official newsletter, not yet.
Okay. But just mention to the listeners the URL, and we'll do this at the end also of the.
It's www.sportsreclamationproject.com.
Okay, very good. All right. Now, you mentioned about 9-year-old kids crying on the sideline, and I coached basketball, but my main thing was baseball. And I want to ask you, what is your opinion, young kids, do you believe they should have playoffs at all ages, or when do you think they should start having playoffs for kids? Is it 12? Is it 8? Is it 9? Because I see now there's like travel teams like for 7 and 8.
That's a good question, and that's a heavy debate. Travel ball has blew up in ways I don't think anybody expected it, and there's a lot of opinions on that. But I really think about middle school age, sixth grade, seventh grade, is when playoffs should work. If you look at Sweden
in Norway who have been fantastic in sports development. Norway is one of the smallest countries in the world, and they're consistently putting out Olympians. They don't believe in playoffs or national championships like 13. And they go as far as to under 12, if you publish scores, you can be reprimanded or disciplined. I do believe in keeping score at a certain age. But as for playoffs and league championships, you ask me, I think middle school, and I kind of feel the same way about travel sports. Rec sports is kind of a dirty word, and people kind of turn their nose up at it. But rec sports have disintegrated because we've allowed it to.
Right.
Everybody thinks if you smack elite on something, it's elite. Well, if everybody's elite, nobody's elite. And the playoffs and national championships, I've seen them too as young as I saw recently a T-ball national championship, and it blew my mind.
Right. You mentioned travel ball. I want to get into that a little now. And you've done travel ball, I assume, or a
I
little?
coached 2 years as a favor to a friend. Wasn't my cup of tea. God bless travel coaches and travel parents, because I tell my children I love you, and even if you're great at this sport, I'm not working 50 hours a week and spending my whole weekend in a car driving you places.
Right. Okay.
And I played travel ball as a kid.
All right. Is the biggest challenge for coaches in travel ball playing time for the kids?
Absolutely. The issue is travel ball is unfortunately paid to play. And parents, give you a little history on travel ball. I played in Florida. I played for the Florida Elite. They had elite and they had select. And it was through the Central Florida region. You tried out, you made elite if you were good. If you were super good, you made select. Select were the kids who were going to play Division I, fantastic athletes. That's all you had. You had teams per region. Unfortunately, because people saw that it's $1 billion industry, a lot of these travel teams are now a parent who got upset his son or her son was not playing and went out, created a team, got sponsors, smacked elite somewhere on it or select. And now you have 35 teams in a region. I mean, Virginia Beach alone, there is 14 elite travel basketball team programs. And parents fork out their hard-earned money. And a lot of coaches don't like to hear this, but if parents are paying you or programs or parents are paying you their hard-earned money, you owe their kid playing time.
Right.
And it goes back to that meaningful minutes thing.
Yeah.
And some kids are going, I had a student who, for volleyball, traveled to Atlanta to play in the tournament and didn't play.
That's from
a
Florida?
5-day tournament and did not play.
I see.
And that's unacceptable.
Right. John, and by the way, we're talking to Jon Orr of the Sports Reclamation Project. Great organization. You have to check out his website. When I coached, I came up with an idea, and it was just recreational little league. I learned after a couple of years, they would have a draft, that the draft was fixed in a way. I can't explain it to you. So I came up with the idea. I said, look, if there are 8 teams, let's each team protect 2 players, coach, assistant coach, whatever it is, and let's the coaches figure out remaining players, pick out the teams, the 8 teams, so they're even, and we pick it out of a hat. And my theory was that parity is better for the league, better for the teams, better for the individual talent. And they didn't want to do it. They were happier going to a championship at 25-0 and winning every game 12-0. And I told them, look, you're better off if your team is like 15-10 and they win some 3-2 games and lose some 5-3 games. The players will become better athletes. And I was shot down, John. And what's your take on that?
I want to give you 2 organizations I've worked with. Now, as I currently am a volunteer coach, I've coached as high as high school. Now the running joke with me is I won't coach above age 9 because I'm tired of getting everybody's bad attitudes and bad habits. I worked with Upward Sports, which is a faith-based organization. Upward does a tryout. Kids come in, they run through a series of drills. We score them, and then the gentleman who runs the league distributes based on average. So, you score kids 1 to 50, hypothetically. He distributes them to where everyone's closely averaged about a 30 skill level. It's fair, it's balanced. You're going to have some blowouts, but they're few and far between.
Right.
And then I was I'm going to say it now. They got mad at me when I called them out when I was employed by them, the YMCA Southampton Roads. They were so short one year. I had 2 teams in the same age bracket. So theoretically, me and one assistant had 25 6 and 7-year-olds in the gym for an hour for basketball practice a week. But I ran across a team that had 6 coaches. And it was 6 coaches whose kids all played on the same team. They were using the coaching loophole of, if you coach a team, your kid plays for you, to stack a team. Right. And the other 5 kids on that team requested to play for that guy. And the issue, and the older league had the same thing, but they had one team that was like the Island of Misfit Toys. It was everybody who didn't know somebody was on one team. Right. And then they gave them a 19-year-old volunteer coach. And it got so bad, I was actually asked to take over that league, take over the team. But I brought up to him several times, why don't you do a tryout in the draft? Why don't you eliminate the coach request loophole? Why don't you put a cap? We have such a coaching shortage that meet and greet days, we are asking parents to step up and volunteer. Why don't you put a cap that you can only have 2 coaches per team? If these guys are willing to be assistants, these gentlemen should be willing to take a team. Right. But again, it came down to records, wins and losses. And the funny thing was, there was no playoff in any of these leagues. There was no league championship. There was no playoffs. It was 8 games and you were done. But people were more obsessed with a useless 8-0 record in the YMCA than they were about balanced games. And I believe stuff like that contributes to the attrition rate. Kids would rather play and lose than sit on the bench and have fun. And kids would rather play competitive than go. The team I ended up taking over, I took over in the 4th week of the season. They had scored 11 points in their first 3 games. Right. You think any of those kids came back the next year?
Yeah.
None. So they lost 12 kids because of adult egos.
Now, you mentioned, too, I want to talk about the parental contracts if they, in youth sports, if they work at all. I know years ago they were tried, but I want to ask you quickly, you're down in Virginia Beach, right?
Yes, sir.
You're playing in Florida. You mentioned that they have a hard time getting coaches, all right? And my theory, I'm up in New York, is that it's so expensive to live. A lot of families, both parents are working and some have 2 jobs. But I have a friend that runs a softball league, and I actually work with him. Do you find where you are, is there a huge shortage of umpires and referees? And why do you think that is?
Absolutely. I also referee. I enjoy refereeing. Maybe I'm a lunatic. I enjoy refereeing because as a referee in the youth leagues, you can kind of be a coach on the floor. Like, I'm of the belief every kid to age 10, if you call a foul, needs to know why you called that foul. It helps him grow and develop. However, with referees, you get what you pay for. And I don't say that to debase referees or anything because I am one. But if you're playing rec ball, expect recreational league referees. Some of those kids are 16, 17 years old. And the problems I've ran into is they won't come at me, the large grown man. But when I've got a 16-year-old on the floor, he makes a call. That coach is up in his face wanting answers, almost trying to intimidate them.
Right.
Parents, on the other hand, they think it's fair game on everybody. My favorite story to tell was last winter at the YMCA during halftime. I was getting there at 8 in the morning, coaching my 3 to 5-year-old team, which if you ever get a chance to coach toddlers, Do it because it's such a joy. It's so fun. Coaching my teams, and I refereed the middle school and high school boys.
Right.
Somebody gave me a pedometer as a joke, and I put 12 miles one day. But I had a father follow me into the urinal while I'm using the restroom at halftime to complain about calls I had missed. And I'm looking over my shoulder going, sir, nothing about this is weird to you. Parents, I've had people shove camera phones in my face. I've had coaches confront me after winning for blowing a technical for their assistant coach cursing me out on the sidelines.
So do you see referees and umpires quitting down
Absolutely.
They do.
Absolutely.
And there's a shortage. So do you ever, when you were refereeing, did you ever go into games where there was only one referee because they couldn't get another person?
I have done that at Upward in the church leagues. And Upward, again, Upward's a great program. It's faith-based. And I always tell people when they look into that, I'm not putting anybody my faith out there. I just say you go in, you know it's faith-based. Don't think you're being blindsided. I've done those, and I've done some elementary school games like that. But I've been very fortunate to have at least two. You always want to have three with the older kids, but at least with two, you can work. But I'm currently in the process of, with a representative down here in Virginia, I'm a huge referee advocate. We're working on, I just got the draft in my emails, putting a law on the books to protect referees from being assaulted and abused, because that is a growing trend as well, to where referees are being physically attacked.
Well,
I've had parents come after me in the parking lot.
in Europe, some soccer referees have been literally killed.
Exactly. But these are professional soccer referees.
Right,
I'm talking
yeah,
about
recreational.
10-year-old rec ball referees. I have a kid. He's a great kid. He's off at college now. But his dad used to come. His dad was a big Marine. Like, his dad was one of those guys, he didn't give orders twice. Would come and sit in the bleachers for his games. Imagine having a kid with a job, dropping him off and sitting there for the 4 hours he worked. Could you imagine doing that at McDonald's with your teenager?
Yeah.
But so we've got protections, but a lot of the referees have left because they've been physically assaulted. They've been ambushed.
Jon, I want to move on. Again, we're talking with Jon Orr from the Sports Reclamation Project, a great organization. And he's just starting. If you're involved in youth sports, you have to look into it. I mentioned before, parental contracts years ago, they tried. Do they still try them in youth sports with parents and coaches, or are they just, it's a waste of time?
Yes and no. Some do, some don't. Everybody has the let the coaches coach, let the players play, let the referees referee. The problem with parental contracts is everybody who attends those games are not parents. One of the funniest jokes we have is we get more issues from grandparents, especially in the leagues that have modified rules. Grandma and granddad, nobody's more protective or proud than grandparents. They'll give you more of a problem because, for example, we're not playing by traditional basketball rules in some leagues. But the thing with parental contracts is not everybody there is a parent. Sometimes it's an uncle. Sometimes it's a friend. Some leagues try and enforce them. Some leagues, for lack of better expression, don't care. They got your check. They got your money. Good luck to the referees. Godspeed. Good luck to the coaches. Godspeed. And then we come back and wonder why coaches aren't coming back. Like, I do it because I love it, but I understand I'm an anomaly. My kids have all outgrown the ages in the sports I coach. My oldest is a high school wrestler. My youngest is a singer. So I'm doing, and a lot of times when kids age out, the parents age out with them. It's different, but parental contracts are a great idea. It looks good on paper, but it doesn't really, doesn't really hold much water, unfortunately.
Yeah. I want to get into something that I think it's going to be affect youth sports. If it hasn't affected now, it will. The NIL in college with all the money. But before I do that, and we're going to wrap it up after that, Jon, I went to your beautiful website, and it's funny. You have a gorgeous picture of a basketball courts that are empty, and you wrote something about it, and it's. I wanted to ask you because I kind of think we're getting away from like unstructured sports where you could go down to the playground. I used to love, I'm a big guy. I used to love to play 3-on-3, not necessarily a full court 5-on-5. To me, it was the greatest thing in the world. I wasn't that fast, so in the half court, I was more effective. But what's your take as far as are we having too much structure? We see, I think with the I do a lot of work with T-ball. I just think that there's not enough what I call imagination time where kids could go in the backyard and figure out games with other kids. It seems like we have a lot too much structure sometimes. So I want to know what your take is as far as structure versus unstructured with youth sports, particularly basketball. That's your strength.
I always use Michael Jordan, the greatest basketball player of my lifetime. I'll be taking no questions on that. It's Michael Jordan. Everybody knows Michael Jordan, and I'm a Knicks fan, so that hurts saying that. Michael Jordan was cut from his high school team. Everybody knows that. It's a legendary story. Michael Jordan's mom and dad didn't go hire a private trainer. They didn't hire private coaches. They literally gave him a basketball and told him to get to work. He went to playgrounds. I'm a firm believer in playing unstructured. I have parents ask me, especially it's funny because I know they mean well. I'm not taking a shot at them. They mean well. What drills can I do to get him better? Sir, he's 8. Go play with him. Shoot with him. Let him figure it out. The problem with basketball is a lot of creativity. Drills are very rigid. They're necessary at a time. Basketball is fluid. And the playground, I'm with you. I grew up on the playgrounds. I wish playground basketball would come back because you learn more on the playground. You're 16 years old. You're playing against a grown man who works at UPS during the day.
I just want to interrupt you for a second because I want to be fair because unlike when I was brought up, a parent didn't have to worry if a 11, 12, or 13-year-old kid went to the playground. Either if they're from the distance, they're walking from their home, if they live in the projects, whatever, or in a suburban house, if they're walking to the playground and walking home afterwards, or what's going to happen at the playground. Is that a huge issue right now, you
That
find?
unfortunately is. And I'm working with a couple groups in the area about, the church I work with now for basketball has a beautiful facility. 6 goals, two full courts. I'm kind of gently working with a guy about, hey, man, open this up for kids to come in and play one night a week. But I really believe the unstructured play is where you learn to love the game. In order to be great at a game, you have to love it. I mean, there's no way about it. You see the athletes all the time that get drafted, and they have all the intangibles in every sport, but they don't love the game. And that's the thing. But let them go out and play. Let them have fun. Let them be creative. It didn't always have to be running through cones or working with a private coach. We play, and this is where I get on travel ball. We play too many basketball games, and we do not practice enough.
How do we resolve the worry from parents about going? I mean, should municipalities hire like teenagers to with a walkie-talkie just to like babysit the court? I don't know. It's funny because we accept things today that we didn't accept years ago. Like my high school has had metal detectors for the last 20 years. So I mean, John, how do we resolve the issue of safety at the schoolyard?
If I knew, I would I wouldn't be here right now because we'd be doing it. I wish I did. And I'm with you. Like I said, you and I are from different generations. We spoke earlier. I mean, it wasn't uncommon for me to ask permission, take $1, get on the city bus, ride down to the rec center on a Saturday morning at 9 o'clock, be back for dinner. I didn't have a pager. I didn't have a cell phone. My parents had to trust where I was at, make good decisions. I'm talking 13, 14 years old. I
Right.
have a 14-year-old daughter. She does not go to the restroom at Walmart without me walking her up and standing outside the door.
Yeah.
And my son, until he was about, well, my son's 6'5" now, but it wasn't until he was about 16, I would trust him. You go, no, you meet me back.
Right.
And that's unfortunate. I wish I had the answers.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's a huge issue.
it is. I wish there
It,
were more rec centers that opened up, but
right.
again, there's a cost point.
It is.
Um,
Yeah, I want to get into, we're going to wrap it up. But the last thing is, a few people sent me an email the last week, and I guess you heard the story. I might have gotten the facts different. That the basketball coach at the University of Miami, I think it was University of Miami,
yes.
he had 8 players went into his office the day after they were eliminated, and they said that they're going into the transfer portal. And
That was during the 2023 Final Four.
okay, all right,
Yes, after they lost to after they lost to UConn, that happened.
and just guide me. Do I have it right where the coach he did he resign or
He just stepped down recently, yes.
he stepped down because the NIL for a lot of you listeners, I'm sure most of you know it's name, image, likeness. It was a court case resolved actually with a basketball player, UCLA Bannon, I think it was.
Oh, the O'Bannon brothers,
Yeah,
yes.
where they said that they used his image, and the short of it is now that they're literally paying college athletes, and they're just moving from school to school to get the largest amount of money, which I think it's John, it's like a blessing and a curse, but filtering down to youth sports where they were all looking for the college scholarship. Now there's a second pot of gold. Did I say gold? Gold at the end of the rainbow. How do you think it's going to affect youth sports? They're all going to really go crazy with their kids now.
The optimist in me says it's not going to. The realist in me says it's coming. I hold the NCAA in contempt for allowing it to get this way, because if they would have just agreed to find a better way to agree with players. And I always say it goes back to Todd Gurley, the running back from Georgia in 2015, who was suspended for taking money to sign jerseys with his name on it. But when you looked at the University of Georgia website, they were selling the same exact jersey for $500 a piece. That's when the real talk about should players be getting paid. NIL, it's an evil. I support you. 18 years old, you should have a right to make a living off your skill. There needs to be some sort of cap. There needs to be some sort of ruling. We were just talking about this yesterday at basketball, that it's not too long. You're going to see somebody play 4 years at 4 different schools. I think there needs to be a tie-in to where if you hit the transfer portal, there needs to be maybe time. And there needs to be a cap on NIL money, because you're going to eventually have players who are going to, do you remember the SMU, the Pony Express, the running joke that Eric Dickerson took a pay cut to go to the NFL?
Right.
That's going to become a true story.
We going to see different websites or different batting cages or basketball facilities? They're going to have signs. We can train your 12-year-old and we guarantee he'll make NIL money. And you're going to see these private lessons that are now, let's say, $85 for 45 minutes are going to go up to like $200. I'm kind of wondering, maybe it won't filter down to that, but I just see like the Wild West getting more wilder, John.
You already have it. You have coaches, there's some in the area, that will guarantee, I'm going to have your kids doing Division I drills. 7-year-olds don't need to be doing Division I basketball drills. 7-year-olds need to be learning to play. But I could see it coming. And then, personal story, I have a nephew that was a Division I college football player. He got in right before the NIL. The NIL is so crazy. He saw significant time at a Power 4 university. He became a father, and I'm so proud of him. He's gotten his education. He wanted to transfer out. He was not a starter at said Power 4 university, but he saw time. He was in the rotation. The only school that would give him an opportunity for his graduate year was a Division II school. It's going to change with this transfer portal because scholarships are going to go away. If you can give a scholarship to an 18-year-old underdeveloped kid or a 20-year-old that played 2 years at the University of Kentucky, who's that scholarship going to?
Yeah, yeah.
The
And
NIL is there needs, all I'm going to say is God bless anybody who can make a living and provide for their family and set the future up. But there needs to be regulations.
right. And
There needs to be rules. And unfortunately, I think it's going to take, and I'm betting on the NFL doing it, it's going to take a lawsuit from the NFL because you're going to have someone like that, Shador Sanders, who's making a ton of money in NILs, going to try to hold up the NFL because he's taking a pay cut.
that's right. Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. We're missing some of these dedicated athletes that no matter what they make, like a Michael Jordan or a Tom Brady or a Derek Jeter, that they'll just work at it to be great. And it's funny, John. I'm going to wrap it up. I'm going to give you a chance, and you're going to talk about your organization like you're talking to the Indiana State Recreation Department. But I wanted to mention on the NIL because I made a few predictions a few years ago. I said when the suit came out, I said the NCAA is going to get weaker. That's number one. Number two, eventually you're going to see college conferences. They're not going to be called the Big 12 or the Pac-12. They're going to be called like the Amazon Conference, the Apple
Wow.
Conference, the Microsoft Conference. That's what's going to end up running college sports. And we're seeing a little bit of that because of this college football playoffs is so popular and they have to straighten it out with the seedings and everything, which they will eventually. But we live in a capitalist society and it's all about money, John. That's the way it is. That's what's going to happen. And part of me says some of these athletes that are moving from school to school, they're missing a good part of their college life, which I loved outside of the classroom. You grow that way. But okay, John, I did too much talking. You're the star of the show. You're sitting in front of the Indiana Recreation Department. I want you to tell us about the Sports Reclamation Project and what you can do for us and what you do for other people.
Thank you. The Sports Reclamation Project is just a goal and project to return normalcy to youth sports, give youth sports back to the kids. It's called youth sports for a reason. Currently, I'm just spreading the message of the things I believe, things I've seen. I'm going to be putting programs out there, goals by the end of the year. I'm working on a book as well to come out by the end of the year. But my goal is to reduce the 70% retention rate in youth sports. I'm a firm believer a ball in the hands keeps them
I think
hands
you
out of
meant
trouble.
attrition rate, right? Not
Yes,
retention.
my apologies.
That's all right.
A ball in the hands keeps them hands out of trouble. The formative years when kids are walking away from sports, they're picking up drugs, things like they shouldn't be touching. We need community mentors. We need people committed, not just as a coach on the court, but as a mentor in life decisions. We need coaches that understand that being a good athlete means being a good student, being a good citizen, being a good sport. If I were to have one goal for the Sports Reclamation Project in 2025, it would be for every coach of every sport to go into the season, the beginning of the year, and say to themselves, regardless of record, regardless of standings, regardless of whatever, if everybody on this team says, Mom or Dad, I want to sign up and play next year, then you've done your job. And I promise you, if you focus on that, if you focus on that mindset, you'll see wins, you'll see growth, you'll see victories. As a coach, the great John O'Sullivan, he's wrote several good books on coaching. He sums it up. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
There you go.
And that
And
comes that
John, okay, let me just ask you this. How would they contact Jon Orr of the Sports Reclamation Project?
easy. You can contact me at John at the sportsreclamationproject.com. I'm on Instagram under the Sports Reclamation Project, or you can find me on Facebook at the Sports Reclamation Project.
And it's John, is it Jon?
Jon and then ORR.
Oh, is it Jon Orr at the Sports Reclamation?
No, I'm sorry, Jon, Jon at Sports Reclamation Project.com.
Just spell reclamation, just so our fans will know.
RECLAMATION.
Project.com.
Yes,
John,
sir.
this has been really great. I'm going to have you back on Shoe Pack Sports. Don't go off after I close this out because there's a lot we didn't touch upon, specialization. I wanted to get more into practices. That's my strength. So, John, thank you so much for coming. The Sports Reclamation Project is going to be a tremendous organization, and I will be in touch with you.
Thank you for having me. Have a great 2025.